I used to be an adventurer and then took a las cannon to the knee.
This is Phil.
Hi.
He's one of my oldest friends and a pretty smart fella.
Because I dropped paint on my trousers.
Well, most of the time. But when presented with something as huge in scope as the Warhammer 40,000 hobby for the first time, it can be difficult to know where to start.
Wash your crotches.
In this series, I'll be taking him from green as grass recruit to fully fledged battle commander. So welcome back to Hobby Bootcamp, episode
4.
where last time we looked at playing a game of Warhammer 40,000, getting you into the basics, and now it's time to flip the script and go for some advanced painting techniques.
The first painting experience was challenging, but I think I learned a lot about layering colours and how to fix mistakes.
There's going to be plenty more of that because we're going to go on to some slightly more tricky painting techniques. So we decided to focus here on the Tau Commander battle suit. Because this is quite a big model, I didn't want Phil to feel overwhelmed, so we actually ended up focusing on just one leg of the model.
Just that one leg took me 2 days?
Yep, 2 days, two solid evenings of painting.
Yeah. Ollie had sub-assembled the commander, which was great because it meant that I could take all the parts that were getting in the way off and just focus on the parts that I wanted to paint.
Sub-assemblies are great, and you can keep your paintbrush out of the way, which is going to be important when we come on to our first technique, which was shading. Now, we looked at a couple of different methods of shading. The first one was an all-over wash. This is where I started with my painting. Shade it all with Null and Oil and then proceed on to highlights. How did you find that sort of washing step?
I thought it was amazing how much of a difference shading made everything look way better. And the little kind of inaccuracies and stuff that were on the model just kind of disappeared. Now, first off, you want to make sure you get your paint nice and thin here. So we were using Null and Oil as the colour that we kind of washed over. We decided to do this on the sort of crotch part, mostly because of what I knew was coming later. I knew this wasn't going to be a part we were going to put very much focus on, for obvious reasons. Now, we actually then did another method of shading. So we pin shaded in the recesses of the model to bring out the shadows in those areas and also to avoid kind of dulling the really bright colours on the surface area of the armour.
Which we'd really spent a long time working on, so we didn't want to have to go over it with any more layers of orange. Key here, get a really fine brush, make sure that your paint is thin enough to flow directly into those recesses, and also only take your brush from one side to the other. Don't keep kind of brushing it back and forth. That's actually a good lesson for all beginners, really. You want to just take one long stroke and try and get as few of those as possible, which is why also I recommend using bigger brushes for most things, though for pinwashing, a tiny little brush will help a lot. Now, we said that we didn't want to darken down the orange bits about, but mistakes did happen and are going to happen. How did you kind of deal with that when that did occur?
2 methods. I think one was just quickly wiping it away with your finger. I think if you immediately notice something and you quickly wipe it away, you should be fine. Yeah, so the second one was just going in and fixing it up with a brush, which was quite easy to do.
You can see that in the painting episode of Phil's Journey, where just undercoating with grey is going to make it much easier for that orange to cover. So we ended up with a lovely pin-washed leg, ready for some highlights.
And I love the contrast that the pin washing gave. You could really suddenly brought out those little details in the armour.
Beautiful, so beautiful.
Made me feel very talented.
So talented. Just look at this talented boy.
Liquid talent.
After we got our pinwashing in, we moved on to edge highlights. The idea here is to take a lighter version of the colour that you've painted on the rest of the armour. On the orange, we're using a bit of yellow mixed into the orange to give it a real pop. And then we also did the white. We'd previously gone over with sky grey, and then it was sky grey and white for the edge highlights, and go around all the edges. So, Seems straightforward, right?
Seems straightforward, but the highlighting was the low light of the week.
Very nice. Let's see what you did there. There are a couple of tips, though, that I think you probably could give to other beginners that you came across while attempting to edge highlight.
Yes, I think, first of all, choose a colour, mix a colour that is bright enough to offer a contrast. The first 1 or 2 edge highlights I did, the colour wasn't bright enough to stand out. The second one was pretty much a lesson in how to paint, which was getting the right amount of paint onto my brush so it didn't pool or spill or splash across the model. And once I figured out how to get the amount of paint on my paintbrush just right, it was then a matter of doing one clean swoop and not trying to repeatedly try and highlight across the edges, but just doing it in one little go.
But it's not just the amount of paint on the paintbrush either. How you hold the paintbrush, as shown in our previous episode, holding closer to the end is going to give you a neater look at it. But when you had really harsh edges, you could also hold it in a different orientation as well.
Yeah, so taking the side of your paintbrush and then sort of scooping it up sideways. For the larger edges of the panels, it was much easier to use the side of the paintbrush as opposed to the tip, as it gave a more even spread of paint. After a bit of trial and error, to be honest, I thought it looked much better than without edge highlights. So I know they're a bit of a pain, but to be honest, I saw the difference it made.
Yeah.
Can recommend.
Throughout the painting process, actually you'll see there are stages where your model looks worse than how it did before. The key is don't be disheartened by that. You're always going to get back to it. So this is often going to happen with the base coats, right? You'll paint one base coat and be like, oh, that looks great. And then go in with another one and you'll be like, oh, I've gone over everything I did. You know? Yeah. It looks terrible. Similar with edge highlights. You splash a bit and you're like, oh, why did I bother doing edge highlights? It looked great before. But then you realize when you go in and sort those out again, you're like, actually, it does look better. You just had to go through those steps.
So in conclusion, is it worth the emotional damage? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. After that, I thought it might be fun to give Phil some more techniques which are a bit more specific focused. They're kind of skills or little things that I've picked up from a couple of different sources. First of which was battle damage.
I was a bit hesitant about taking my really neat, pristine armor panels.
He had worked so hard. He had worked so hard on his armor panels.
Tirelessly. To have to like draw random sort of jagged edges across them to represent battle damage.
Let's talk about what we did in terms of that 3D effect. So we started off with a little bit of brown. I used Vallejo flat brown, but any kind of sort of brown or dark tone will really work for this. And you just put little random bullet hole looking circular things or scratches or cuts or whatever you really want. That looks fine and gives you a little bit of visual interest, but the key, the secret sauce, the secret techers, which just about everybody knows. But the secret techers.
The secret techers that you're listening here for the first time.
What was the secret techers?
The secret techers was to add a lighter color just above it to give it a 3D effect.
Exactly. So we're making it look as though the sun is coming from above, hitting on the top edge of where maybe you've got a bullet hole or you've got a scratch mark, and just kind of then leaving in shadow all the bits underneath. And I think we can agree that for a first time, he absolutely smashed it.
It was really good fun. I really enjoyed it. I thought, you know, after I put in the first couple of bullet holes and scratches, I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to go to town on this. And you know what? It's a lot of fun.
It's a good way of, particularly when you're a beginner, covering up any areas that you found really awkward.
Yes, there were two parts of the armor panel that I'd definitely not done a good job on, and I just put a scratch on them, and now all that I look at is the scratch, and I ignore the kind of dodgy colours in behind.
The art of the paint job, particularly when you're a beginner, is directing people's attention to the bits that you want them to look at. Not every single part of a model is going to look great.
Like the crotch.
Like the crotch. Speaking of directing attention to parts you want people to look at, what was the last technique we looked at, Phil?
So the last technique was about creating a lens for the eyes and any surfaces that are a bit more sort of glassy rather than metallic.
We were drawing our attention away from the leg and onto the face, where I wanted to show this kind of cool lens effect. We started off with the base coat of blue, as you will have seen on Phil painting the drones in the earlier part of this series. From there, what was the kind of method that we went through?
So we gradually made the blue lighter and lighter. We mixed in lighter colours of blue, and we drew like a crescent shape across one side of the lens, and then a dot of white right in the middle. And that kind of gives a nice impression that the eye is looking somewhere and that there's a reflection of the light. So I thought that really kind of brought the little face to life and brought the little eyes to life.
Something like that, it only takes a couple of moments actually to get that layer on. Granted, you do have to be quite careful, have quite a steady hand, and you were getting much better at that by the end. But it only takes a couple of moments to do things which look like they're much more complicated.
Yeah. I thought by the time Ollie was introducing me to my 5th advanced technique that I was going to lose it, but actually it was such a small thing, it took maybe 2 minutes.
Yep.
It made a massive difference to how the model looked.
There's plenty more techniques for us to show, but that's all we covered in this week's episode. So let me know if you'd like me to bring Philip back to paint more of his towel and show him some more techniques like glazing, wet blending, power weapons.
He's just making up words at this point, I'm convinced. Applying the base colours to get them battle ready kind of brought the model to life, but I think this is kind of what makes each model stand out and a little bit unique, which felt like a really fun thing to embark on.
If you're enjoying the content, also hit the like button, let Philip know how he's getting on in the comments down below.
I do appreciate all of your support. It's been a big factor that's kept me going over the last couple of weeks and has really made me motivated to push myself.
Yeah, you guys are the best. You guys rock. Phil has enjoyed it. Big thumbs up. There's other videos in this series where I've taken Phil all the way from Warhammer noob up to Battle Commander painting edge highlights, and also stay tuned to Hobby with Ollie for the next part where we'll be getting to the battlefield with the 10th edition rules. Yes, so they're finally out, all the data sheets are out, and by the time you're watching this, all the points values will be out as well, so we can see how many Space Marines will need to match up against your Tau. If you're looking at getting into Warhammer 40k 10th edition yourself or getting a friend involved, check out my affiliate links to Element Games in the description down below. Element Games is a place where you can get a discount on your hobby products compared with Games Workshop, and if you follow those links, I'll get a little kickback on anything you purchase at no additional cost to you, so it's a win-win.
No brainer.
In the meantime, my name has been Ollie.
My name's been Phil.
This has been my hobby,
And we'll see you next time.